My name is Tommy. I grew up in a suburban neighborhood on the outskirts of Arizona. When I was a child, lying in bed at night and looking out the window, what stood out to me the most was the silence. Not a peaceful silence, but one that felt like everyone in the neighborhood was crying inside, their pain unheard. In that house, there were just my mother, my sister, and me. And my father? He was nothing more than a stranger whose name appeared on court documents, or the man my mother blamed every time she wanted to silence us. Living with my mother was like sharing a house with a bomb whose detonation time you could never predict. My father had left when we were still little, when I was 6. He left behind nothing but an empty chair, a few old photographs, and the echo of my mother's anger. When I think back to those days, the thing I remember most is hunger. We never had a full fridge, but there was something colder than the emptiness of the fridge: my mother's gaze. When we woke up hungry or asked, "Mom, isn't there any breakfast?" she always gave the same answer: "Your father's fault. Go cry to him." In those moments, along with my childhood, my faith in humanity faded. I was only 8 years old, and my sister was 10. As soon as we got home from school, we'd change our clothes, do our homework, sweep the house, and clean the kitchen. No one ever said, "Well done." Our mother was either lying in bed or complaining in front of the computer. Food, we made it ourselves. Dry pasta or stale peanut butter spread on bread. The first big lie my mother told us was, "I'm fighting for you." But in reality, we were the ones fighting to survive without her. At just 10 years old, I was cleaning the house. At 8, I was cooking meals. My mother never saw us as children. She saw us as her servants. It was as if she had given birth to us, just to use us. Years passed, but nothing changed. By the time I reached my senior year in high school, life became even harder. My grandmother, my mother's mother, passed away. Then my mother quit her job. The reason? "I just want to rest." But her idea of rest meant staying up all night drinking and sleeping all day. That summer, a $75,000 inheritance arrived. Everything my grandmother had saved throughout her life. My mother burned through it in 3 months. All that remained was a new television, a few bottles of alcohol, and the sound of her loud laughter. By autumn, the electricity had been cut off because the bills hadn't been paid. The fridge was empty again, but my mother still said the same thing: "You have a job, so why don't you pay the bills?" I had a part-time job after school. I was saving up to go to college, but my mother acted as if my dreams were nothing but her disappointments. Whenever I talked about school, my grades, or my future, she would roll her eyes. A grown man still looking for attention. But I was still a child. All I wanted was a little love, a little support. Maybe even just to hear, "I'm proud of you, son." That year changed everything for me. Suddenly, all responsibilities fell on my shoulders. My mother didn't work, didn't cook, didn't pay the bills, but she still demanded answers from me. Because in her eyes, I was no longer her son. I was simply a man who could earn money. But deep inside me, a decision was growing. No matter how painful it was, I wasn't going to spend my life in my mother's shadow. I wanted a life that lifted me up, not one that crushed me. Maybe for the first time, it was time to fight for my own future. There's a difference between living in a house and belonging to it. I never belonged to that house. It was called my mother's house. And in that house, I was just a guest, an unwanted guest. Every morning, the first thought in my mind was, what will my mother be angry about today? Sometimes I got scolded just for breathing. I was in my senior year of high school. Every morning I went to work first, then rushed to school. In the evenings when I returned home, my mother would be lying on the couch staring at the TV. She usually had an empty wine bottle in her hand and scattered pill containers sat on the side table. If she spoke to me, she either asked for money or reminded me how much of a burden I had been to her. "I never got to live my youth because of you." I heard that sentence a lot, but I always wondered, had I stolen her youth, or had she stolen my childhood? My sister Lisa and I tried to hold on to each other, but Lisa couldn't endure it anymore. As soon as she graduated, she moved to another state, without even looking back. She left me a letter with only one sentence: "Save yourself. Don't let her destroy you." But I stayed, because a part of me still hoped my mother would change. I still wanted to see her as a mother. One night early in my final year of school, it was around 1 a.m. I had just gotten home from work, exhausted. We had no food. I opened the fridge. Empty. The only thing inside was a jar of pickles. I took it out and started eating them with a spoon. That was when my mother walked up behind me. Do you know what she said? "Those were my pickles. Who do you think you are, eating my food?" Then she snatched the jar from my hands and threw it onto the floor. Glass shards scattered across the kitchen, pickle juice pooling around my ankles. In that moment, for the first time, I felt nothing. No fear, no anger, just emptiness. That emptiness settled into my heart that night. The next morning, before leaving for school, I looked in the mirror. Dark circles under my eyes, my face pale. But I had made a decision. For the first time in my life, I would do something without asking my mother's permission. I secretly filled out a college application, a scholarship program in a state far from Arizona. I had only one chance. But if I could seize it, I would finally escape this house, this woman, this suffocating life. At night, while everyone slept, I snuck out to the library, writing essays for my application, trying to tell my story. Sometimes I wondered, why did I have to explain myself? But then I realized, for the first time, I was writing my life. And I was no longer the victim of this story. I was the hero. One day, my mother noticed my efforts. She walked into my room, saw the application forms on my desk, and said only one thing: "If you think you're leaving, you're wrong. You can't do anything without me." That day, my mother threatened me, but without realizing it, she also gave me my greatest strength. Because with those words, she broke the chains inside me. The door of the cage she had trapped me in for years opened for the first time. That night, as I lay in bed, the wind howled outside. But for the first time, I felt at peace, because I had made my decision. I was going to leave, no matter what it took. On my graduation day, no one was there for me. While everyone in the stands embraced their families, I stood alone on stage. I heard no applause, felt no presence behind me. But that day, for the first time, something took root within me. My loneliness was no longer a source of shame. It had become my strength. After the ceremony, I left Arizona with a small suitcase and an old bus ticket. No one watched me leave, but I turned back one last time, because I couldn't step into the future without saying goodbye to my past. My new life began in a tiny dorm room in a city I had never known. The first few weeks, I was quiet, cautious. Even when people laughed, I watched them like a foreign creature in an unfamiliar habitat. When someone approached me and asked, "Where are you from?" my answer was always the same: "From far away." I couldn't tell the truth, because while others had received love from their mothers, I was still suppressing the echoes of her curses before I fell asleep. Even in the safety of my new bed, I lay down not with peace, but with vigilance, expecting her to scream, to throw something, to raise her voice. Those fears still echoed inside me. But one morning, running late for class and sprinting down the street, I realized something. No one was yelling behind me. No one was belittling me. No one was stopping me. That day, for the first time, I felt free. The cars passing by, the crowd on campus, the people walking beside me. They were all alive, and I was among them. I was finally living. But the past doesn't disappear so easily. One day, as I rummaged through my old belongings in my dorm room, I found something tucked away in my suitcase, a letter from my sister. That one-sentence letter, "Save yourself." The ink was faded, smudged from my fingerprints over time, but the words still pierced my heart. In that moment, I realized I had never forgotten Lisa, and while I was escaping, she was still lost. That night, I couldn't sleep. Just as my life was finally settling into place, guilt crept in. Where was Lisa? We hadn't spoken in a long time, and I had lost all her contact information. Her phone number, her email. The next morning, I went to the library and spent hours searching through old social media accounts, address records, school histories, anything that might lead me to her. All day, I drafted messages and then deleted them because I didn't know what to say. Am I looking for you? Do you miss me? Why did you leave me alone? So much resentment tangled inside me, impossible to untangle. But by evening, I settled on a single sentence. Are you still there? After sending the message, I stared at the screen for hours. No blue check mark, not even seen. That night, I dreamed of her. She wore a white dress, sitting on a bench in a deserted playground. I walked up to her. She turned to me and simply said, "Stop running." I woke up drenched in sweat. I opened the window. Outside, rain was falling. And in that moment, I realized running from the past doesn't set us free. Until we face it, we only change direction, but we remain in the same cycle. I no longer just wanted to escape. I wanted to understand myself, Lisa, my mother, everything that had made me who I was. Because a quiet voice inside me whispered, healing is not about running, it's about looking, bravely, honestly, without fear. And that night, a new journey began, this time toward my past. Years passed. I graduated from university, went to therapy, worked, fell, got back up. Life kept hitting me hard. But this time when I fell, I didn't cry. I stood back up. I had my own job now, my own home, my own decisions. I lived without relying on anyone. There was always an emptiness inside me, yes, but it no longer consumed me. It simply reminded me, don't forget, you still have an unfinished chapter. It was time to face my mother. I wasn't afraid of her anymore. I was no longer a child standing in her shadow. I was a man. One day, I typed her name into social media. A simple search led me to the city where she lived. She wasn't active online, but I found traces. She had briefly worked for a public institution, then retired. She had remarried. But in my eyes, she was still the woman who had thrown a fork at me in the kitchen. I bought a ticket. Everything was calm. My heart was pounding. I just had one thing left to do: close this chapter. City wasn't far, but I had never been there before. I stayed in a hotel for one night. The next morning, I stood outside the apartment where she lived. I wore a crisp shirt, holding an old photograph in my hand. I knocked. The door opened. An older woman stood in front of me. At first, she didn't recognize me. "Yes?" she asked. Then she looked carefully into my eyes. She knew. Her face turned pale. "Tommy?" she whispered. "Yes," I said. Nothing more. She invited me in. The house was old but spotless. We sat in the living room. I placed the photograph on the table. I was 6 years old in that picture. She was my mother. "Do you remember this photo?" I asked. She covered her mouth with her hand. Silence. Then in a low voice, she finally spoke. "I buried that woman years ago." "I couldn't bury her," I said. "I still lived through the nights when she locked me inside, left me hungry, hit me. You forgot. But I lived it. Every day." She started crying, but her tears didn't move me. "Where is Lisa?" I asked. Her tears froze in her eyes. "I don't know," she admitted. "She left. I never saw her again." I looked at her, and in that moment I knew she had never really searched for Lisa, because to her, Lisa and I had only ever been burdens. "I came here because I wanted you to know. You have no power over me anymore. I'm no longer a child you can break. I'm not at an age where you can ruin my life. I came here to tell you that I have not forgiven you, and I never will." She kept crying. "Please, forgive me," she begged. I shook my head. "No, this isn't about you. This is about me. I am not a victim anymore. And I won't forgive you. Because what that little boy lived through is not something that can be forgiven." I placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a copy of Lisa's letter, one she had written years ago but had never reached me. I had found it once through an unknown account on social media but lost it again. It said, "I had to run, but I never forgot you, Tommy." I turned toward the door. She didn't call after me. She just collapsed into herself. Maybe she was remorseful. Maybe she was just afraid. I didn't care. As I walked down the street, what I felt was not peace, freedom. Her shadow was no longer over me. I hadn't found Lisa, but I had found myself. Tommy no longer just survives. He lives. And sometimes revenge is not in screaming, but in silence.